Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sabbath School. However, it isn't much like Sabbath School. Maybe we should call it our story hour for Sabbath morning. We miss Andrea. We wish that she was here with her children doing what she knows how to do very well. In any case, here we are. We're willing to tell stories so long as the stories last. We can't say that they're going to last forever. Hopefully, the Lord will return us back to our churches soon. That would be such a blessing. I'd like to invite you to bow with me. We're going to pray this morning. Thank you, Lord, for being our God. Thank you for being there. Thank you for inviting us to meet with you this day and for giving us the opportunity to glorify your holy name because you've worked in our lives and we do have stories to tell and we want to praise your name for that. This morning, as we tell stories, we need your Spirit and we thank you for giving us this grace in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, I'm going to start with a story. I became a Seventh-day Adventist, so I guess this story may even have begun before I was a Seventh-day Adventist. I was studying the scriptures and quite excited about the whole thing. I was working in the mines at the time, and my brother-in-law was my partner underground, and we were drilling drifts. What we call drifts is tunnels, and we were doing very, very well and making plenty of money and also being very productive. Well, one day the leaders in the mine came to us, the two of us in the mines, and they said, "We are going to take your brother-in-law away to become a shift boss, and we know that you're very productive. We don't want to lose any production, so we're going to invite you to choose any man you want in the whole mine so that we keep up production over here." Well, they didn't give me even a chance to choose anyone I wanted to work with me in the mines. The very next day they came to me and they said, "Hey, we've got 4 guys here and you can choose any one of these 4 that you want." Well, because I was studying the Bible and I was really eager to share my faith with somebody, anybody, I thought, Lord, what a blessing it would be if only I could have an individual with whom I could share my faith. And so I looked the 4 men over, I knew all of them, and I thought this would be wonderful. Any one of those 3 I think might work, but this one over here, it's not going to work. And so I prayed that the Lord would not allow this one to be chosen. Well, guess what happened? The very one I would not have chosen is the one that ended up to be working with me. Well, because it was him. Now listen, he was a hockey player, he was a boxer, he loved fighting, he was single, he had a new girlfriend every weekend, a new honeymoon every weekend. He was just a wild situation, and I thought, boy, it's no point. There's no point in my trying to witness to this fellow because he's too far gone as far as I was concerned. Now, what do I know? And it just goes to show you that we cannot judge a person's character, really. Now, his character wasn't very good at the time, but I thought he couldn't be reached because he was so far gone. Well, anyway, I began working with him, and I decided that I would not witness to him at all. Now, that's a difficult thing to do because when you're working together, and I happen to be a Sabbath keeper, when Friday afternoon would come along, I would leave the shift and he would be left to finish the work all by himself. Well, for sure, he would ask questions like, "What in the world? Why are you leaving now? We're not done, and we've got to finish this thing." And I had to explain what the Sabbath was all about. But that's all the witnessing that I would do. That's it. And about 3 weeks into this situation, he was getting angry because his machine wasn't working well, and he would pick it up and throw it down the drift, and then he would sit down and smoke a cigarette or two, turn the air blue with cigarette smokes and turn the air blue with cursings, and then he would say to me, "Don't you ever get mad?" Well, certainly I suppose I would get angry sometimes, but he didn't see it, and it was a witness to him, praise the Lord. I don't know how is it that he saw that. In any case, he began to ask questions. And because I thought that it was pointless for me to witness to him, anytime he would ask a question, I would only answer the question and not one iota more. Well, do you know what that did? It kept his curiosity up. Do you know that if I had been trying to witness the way we like to witness, like dump everything we know on a person and let them know everything that we know, then we overwhelm them and they think that we're trying to convert them and they get pushed away. Like pressure begets resistance, you understand. So, but because I wouldn't give him any more than what he would ask for, he kept asking and he kept asking and he kept asking. Well, eventually, I decided that I would move away. I quit my job in the mines. I thought I would serve the Lord instead, which was a wonderful move. And I moved to be 100 miles away from this place where we were working in the mines. Approximately 1 year later, it was Friday afternoon, Friday evening, as a matter of fact, like 7 o'clock in the evening. It was dark outside. And I was sitting in the living room and I heard a knock at the door at my house. And I went to the door and it was my mining partner. And I opened the door and instead of saying hello or how are you or anything of the sort, he said, "Do I have to be baptized?" Well, that was quite an introduction. I invited him into the house. We spent the whole weekend together and he had myriads of questions. It was wonderful. In any case, we had a wonderful weekend. He went back home. The next weekend, my wife and I made the trip 100 miles back to our original home. And we went to spend the weekend with my mining partner. And we were talking about the Lord sitting in the living room. And his wife was in the kitchen and she was listening. And she got some mysteries unraveled for her here. She began to understand something. You see, every Saturday morning, he would pick up his lunch pail, his lunch bucket, and he would go off. He said to her he was going to work, but she knew he had no food in that lunch bucket. And so she was pretty well certain that he must have another girlfriend and that he was going over there every Saturday morning to spend the morning with her. Well, when she was listening to us speaking in the living room about the Lord and about worship on Sabbath and church and all these things, all of a sudden it dawned on her, every morning he was going to church. I mean, every Saturday morning he was going to church, and he wasn't telling her. Well, eventually he became a Seventh-day Adventist. And then eventually he quit the mines, and my brother, who was working for the city at the time, quit his job in the city. Both of them took their families to an unentered territory, a city called Elliott Lake, which was a uranium mining city. There was not one Adventist in the whole city. It was a brand new city, and they spent 2 years and they raised up a church. And to this day, my mining partner is the head elder of that church, and I praise the Lord for a soul won. And of course, his wife and at least one of his children is an Adventist today, and who knows what will happen to the other. We're just praying all the time because the Lord is good. Well, that's part of what I have to say this morning. I'm going to invite my wife, who tells me anyway, she has 3 short stories to share with us, and she brought her weapons too.
Well, good morning. Okay, so yes, I have 3 short stories, and they're all about thieves. And one's in Zambia, one's in Tanzania, and one's in Madagascar. And mostly when you live in poor countries, people are not out there really to hurt you or to try and kill you or anything like that, but they're opportunistic. And so we lived in this little house, and it was at the very end of Riverside on the mountain. It was the last house. There was the river down below, the Kafui River. It was beautiful. And there was bush all around. It was very nice. And on one side it went up like on escarpment, and so it was very nice. And so we had just gotten, not too long before, a puppy, and for a guard dog. And he had never barked at anything before. And so one day I was standing in the living room, and I was standing in the bathroom, and I heard zit. We didn't have glass on our windows. We only had screens. And that zit sounded like a screen being cut. And so our hallway going to the bedrooms in the bathroom was in the middle of the house, and then we had a loft upstairs, and the stairway came down in front. So if you wanted to get out of the bathroom, you came down the hall, and then you were actually under the stairs, and so you walked kind of on the side under the stairs. And so I looked, and there was a guy. We had burglar bars, but they were only wooden. And so he had his hands on the bars, and he was trying to push it, and it's hardwood, so they don't break that easy. And then, so I'm standing there watching him, and then he picks up a stone, and he has this big stone, and he's going to smash it. So I quickly step out and in his view so he can see me, and he just drops the stone and runs. So this was happening. One other Sabbath, we came home from church, and there was some bark on the floor. And my son was sitting on the couch over there, and I was in the kitchen. And I said, you had to go walk by that window in order to get into that kitchen. And so I said, Jason, did you leave that mess on the floor? And he just looks, and he said, and the screen is cut too. And so he came over right away, and sure enough, the screen was cut, just big enough to get a long stick in. You know, I kept my little tape recorder underneath my cupboard every Sabbath. You know, out of sight. You know, there's nothing there, so no reason to break anything. And so, but just this hole is just big enough to get a long stick in, get the handle, and pull it out the window, and add the bark from the... So then one Sabbath, we had this little pup who had never barked, and there I'm sitting on the couch, and this pup starts barking, and barking, and barking, and barking. And so I said, oh, I didn't lock the doors. So I scrouch down, and I go to the door, and I put the deadbolt on. And then I kind of go back and under the stairway, kind of hiding. And I watch this guy with his pry bar, and he's trying to get my front door open. Just like every Sabbath. Of course, everybody knows where the Adventists are on Sabbath. They're in church. And so it's the perfect opportunity. And so, but I had gone to guarding on the Sabbath. And then so you know, it just brings up something in you, actually infuriated me. And so I said, am I going to let him do this? And so he couldn't get the front door open. And then so he's walking around to go to the back door, right, which is on this side of the house. And there's a little porch right by the kitchen. And so I duck down, and I go to the back porch, and I'm in the back porch. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to let him do this, so what am I going to do? And so I look around, There's the broom. There's my slasher. Okay, I can do this. And so I slide the little deadbolt and unlock the door. So he's there at my door now. And so I'm there, like this, standing there, just away from the door. The door is where the camera is, and I don't want to hit this thing. And so I'm standing there like this. And this guy, he opens the door. He's from the outside. So he opens the door, turns around, and backs in. Because he doesn't think anybody's in the house, but he's watching outside. And then I'm there with my slasher, and he just glances back, and he caught sight of me. I didn't hit him. He ran, and I was bare feet. I ran after him. The dog ran after him, but he was long gone. So that was Zambia. So one time, Jason and I were in Dar es Salaam. You know, the Lord protects us through all of this stupidity that goes on. And so one time I was in Dar es Salaam with my son, Jason, and he had just got this new truck, new to Kibidula truck. And when they gave him the truck, they said, "Here's the gas cap." And he said, "Okay." He said, "We just stuffed the rag in so that nobody will steal your gas cap when you go through town." Really? Okay. So we get out, and we get out of the gate of the place where he bought this truck, and then so he puts a gas cap on. So we're going down the streets of Dar, the main street of Dar, and pretty soon the traffic is really, really bad, and you can be stopped for an hour and just make, a few feet sometimes. And so there's this guy, these guys just, they'll open the gas tank, have their jerry can, and fill up their jerry can while the truck is moving, siphoning out of these trucks. And then Jason's watching out the window, and he said, "The guy in the red shirt just took my gas cap." He said, "Go, Mom." So, so I get out of the truck. I see a guy with a red shirt. I go and I accost this guy. I said, "You stole our gas cap." And he said, "No." I said, "Yes, you did." And so I hit all his pockets, and he had a little duffel bag, and I grabbed his duffel bag, and I ruffled through it. And then there's a whole crowd around us, and then there's police, and it's just, he's talking to the police and everything else. And I say, "He stole our gas cap." My son's seen him. And so I look through everything, and these guys never work alone, and we know that. There's always a couple of them, because if you get caught, you could get killed. The people around you will kill you just because you stole. But he didn't have the gas cap. And so as soon as, so I rifled through him, and then I just threw him back his duffel bag, and I said, and so I walked back to the truck, and my son says, wrong red shirt, Mom." So there's nothing I could do at this point, so we just kept going, waiting. So he had only gone probably from here to maybe 50 feet, in the time that it took to do all that. And so wasn't hard. And so the poor guy, I felt bad for him, but that's just the way it is. So the next one, that was Dar es Salaam. So the next one was in Madagascar. So we were there, and we have a doctor, and he has two kids. His little girl had long hair to here, all curly and all in these beautiful little braids that she had, and then she got head lice at school. She was only this big, and so I was going to town, so I decided, okay, well, let me just go from shop to shop to see if we can get some lice shampoo. Otherwise, they just pick out hair after hair, and they go through the whole head that way. I mean, with long hair to here, it was like just amazing. And so quite a job. And so since I was in town, so I went from store to store, downtown, Madagascar, Antananarivo. And so there's, I have my bag over my shoulder, over my head, on my shoulder. So it's harder to get that way. And then I feel somebody at my back, and they grab my purse strap at my back, and they're trying to pull it over my head. But as soon as I feel somebody, I push down on my purse, because that's what you do. If somebody bumps you or touches you, you're being robbed somehow. And so I pushed down on my purse, and they couldn't get it over my head. And so they knocked me to the pavement. And there's people on the streets, but, you know, this all happens so fast. You know, when you get into an accident or something like that, it's over before you even hardly know it happened, you know. And so I'm laying flat on my face. I have my purse here, but the strap is out here, and he comes to grab the purse, and he put his hand right under my face, right by my mouth. And so, you know, this is a time when AIDS is very prevalent. So I bit him, but in my mind it was like, how hard do I bite? Because I don't want to draw blood, you know? And so I bit him, and of course he pulled his hand back, and then he just grabbed the handle and was pulling on the handle. Well, I was not letting go. And so he was pulling me kind of off the sidewalk, and it went downhill. And so he was pulling me there, but by then the people woke up to the fact, hey, something's happening here. And so they took chase. There was two guys. You know these wide elastic belts that they have with a nice little clip in the front? They ripped that in half. And I don't even know when they did that, but they did that as they tried to get this purse off of me. And so as people took chase, well, I got up, but I had a dress with buttons all the way down, and it kind of ripped all the buttons, and so I just, you know, closed it up best I could, and they said, oh, let us call you a taxi. So they never caught the guys, and so they call a taxi, and so I get in a taxi and gets my address, and so he drives me home, and he charges me, and it's like, okay, the thieves never stole from me, but you are robbing me. But he had already given me the ride and everything else, so I paid the price, and I walked out. And so, you know, the Lord, through all of this, He doesn't stop things from happening necessarily, but He protects you. And, you know, there was really nothing in that purse that was worth stealing, and could have just as easily given him the purse, but you know, it's my instinct to fight back. And so now I'm getting older, I'm getting better, and so the Lord is still working with me. So I praise the Lord. Thank you.
And that's why I married her, to protect me. She's my pit bull. Well, I have another story also. I'm pretty well focusing on evangelism this day. I probably could tell two stories. It seems like I have plenty of time. So let me tell a short story to begin with. I was the Bible teacher at Fountain View Academy for a couple of years. And one time I was sitting on the platform in the church, and I don't remember who the pastor was and what they were preaching, but they were talking about, not in gathering, they were talking about investment. Now, this is something that Adventists used to do a long time ago. Everyone would do a little something called investment. They would plant some flowers or they would plant some vegetables, and then they would sell the vegetables, and whatever profit they would make, they would give to the church as an investment, and we could use that for evangelism and stuff like that. Well, anyway, whoever was speaking at the time from the pulpit, I was sitting behind in those days also. Whoever was going to speak would speak, and the elders would remain on the platform. That's how it was in the old days. And they were speaking about investment, and I got to be so inspired. I thought, man, I've got to do something for investment. And right there, I've got the idea that if I could have a Bible study, give a Bible study, I would give $1 for every Bible study I would give. Not just for every person I would give Bible studies to, but every time I gave a Bible study, I would give $1 as investment to the church. Well, that was, of course, on Sabbath. The very next day, Sunday, I was preparing for my classes because I was the Bible teacher at the school. I was preparing for classes around 7 o'clock at night, and there was a knock on the door. So I went to the door, and there was this giant there. His name was Ted Peasgood. He had long hair, and he had a long beard, and his arm was in a sling because he had broken his collarbone. You know, he was a cyclist and whatever. And he said, I need Bible studies. And I said, okay. I'd been praying for Bible studies in any case. And so I invited him in, and we started a series of Bible studies. That very same week, someone came to me and said, there's a lady in town that would like Bible studies. Would you like to give her Bible studies? And so I said, for sure, I want to give her Bible studies. So I started Bible studies with Jennifer. That was her name, Jennifer Murphy, in any case. And that very same week, I'm driving from where we used to live to another town, and there was a guy hitchhiking by the side of the road, and I picked him up, and he was telling me a sad story how he couldn't get a job, and he needed money, and he just couldn't. And I said to him, well, you know, I can solve that problem. I said, it's very easy. And I told him all about tithing, that if we would give 10% of everything that he gained as a profit, that the Lord would see to it that he got a job and all the rest. And so we started Bible studies long distance, like by mail in those days. And no sooner did we start Bible studies did he start giving his tithe. And then, of course, he got a job. He got a job within a couple of weeks of that time. Well, anyway, to make that long story short, no, that's not a very long story. To make that short story just a little bit longer, let me tell you that Ted Peasgood is a Seventh-day Adventist to this day. Jennifer Murphy is a Seventh-day Adventist to this day. And the Lord had heard my prayer. And what a blessing it was to, and every now and again I get the notion, maybe I should tell the Lord that I would give $1 for every Bible study that He would give me to give, because right now I'm looking for Bible studies. And I came here thinking, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a lot of Bible studies. We're going to fill the church. Everything will be wonderful. And then the coronavirus came along, and we can't even talk to each other. We've got to be 6 feet apart. We've got to wear masks, and we've got to close the church, and we can't go to town, and nobody's going to allow you to come to the door and knock on the door. What in the world? So anyway, the Lord has a plan. There's no doubt about it. Another story, let me tell you about. I don't know when this was, 1999, 98, something like this. I forget it. Maybe the year 2000 even. I don't know exactly. But in any case, somebody had a great idea that maybe we should give Bible studies to the whole country of Honduras. Now, how are we going to do that? And when we had a board meeting talking about these things, they asked me, would you like to organize this thing so that we can give Bible studies to the whole country of Honduras? And of course, I said, well, really, that's not my gift, but I know just the person who can do that. And I suggested that my wife should be able to do that. And so my wife was given the job of organizing the whole country. As a matter of fact, and she might correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think she organized 156 evangelistic crusades in 156 different sites in the country of Honduras. Well, simultaneously. I think that was understood. But anyway, so it was. And so I got inspired with that, and I had never given an evangelistic campaign before, and I thought, I want to do this too. We've got a year in preparation, and so I began to study for my first lecture study that I would give, and it took 3 weeks to prepare. And I thought to myself, man, oh man, I've got all this work to do, and now I'm preparing for this, and it's taking so long. I'll never have enough Bible studies to give in order to do a campaign. So I decided, forget this, I'm not doing it. I've got too much to do. And so time went on, and I was traveling for OCI at the time. And as I went traveling for OCI in different countries, I happened to be in Switzerland at one point. And in Switzerland, there was an individual there, Marcus Yaudas, who was supposed to do an evangelistic series on the island of Roatan in Honduras. And he was telling me, my English is not good enough. Maybe I can't do this. Wouldn't you rather do it for me? And I said, Marcus, that doesn't make any sense. You were the, I forget what he was. He had a high station in the conference in Switzerland at the time, and for sure he could do this, and his English was perfect, and there was nothing wrong. And so I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do the health message if you'll do the evangelistic crusade. And he said, okay, that'll be good. So I studied and prepared to do the health message, the health lectures, and he was apparently getting ready to do the evangelistic campaign. And then 3 weeks before we're flying to Roatan, he calls me, and I knew immediately, this guy's calling me. I know what he's doing. And he says, I can't go, I've got this and this and this, you're going to have to do it. It took me 3 weeks to prepare the first sermon. Now he's given me 3 weeks to prepare the whole series, and he's not coming. Because I knew that it was God. I knew that it was God who was telling me what He wanted me to do, that He wanted me to do an evangelistic series. I did not become angry or frustrated. I knew God wanted to do this, therefore there would have to be a miracle in the whole thing. I made my way to Honduras when the time was right, spent a few days with my wife I hadn't seen for a few months, and then I flew to the island of Roatan. You ever want a blessing? Go to the island of Roatan. They speak English there, actually, kind of the worst or the funniest English you ever heard in your life. It is something else. In any case, I enjoyed my time very much, except when I got to Roatan and I got in the airport, flew into the airport, I was met in the airport by the mission president and the church pastor under whose church I would be working. And they both looked at me and said, you can't do evangelism in Roatan the traditional way. It doesn't work. Doug Batchelor was just here a month ago, and he had 400 people attending his meetings, and he only baptized 4 people, and he went away so discouraged. You can't do it that way. It doesn't work on this island. Well, I'd never done evangelism before in my whole life, never mind doing it traditionally or not doing it traditionally. What in the world are they telling me? This isn't going to work. And they said, besides that, the church that you're being assigned has only 1 member, and that member is sick. Won't be coming. Oh, that's encouraging, isn't it? Man. And so it's a bit worrisome, you know, the thing that was there. Anyway, I got started doing evangelism in this little place. And wouldn't you know it, that when I got started to do evangelism in that little church, there was a Baptist church in town who was having a fight. They were having a war among themselves over celebration stuff. You know, all the churches were fighting about celebration in those days. Everyone was struggling to keep the old traditions or to go with rock and roll. And so the more conservative people in the Baptist church decided they would come to my evangelistic series. I don't know how many of them there were, approximately a dozen, I guess, or so. And so that boosted our numbers, and I continued. And instead of doing evangelism the traditional way, which I'd never done before anyway, and by the way, I forgot to tell you something. I had to do a trip to Canada before I went to Roatan. And in Canada, I decided to rent a motel room for 3 days. And I stayed in the motel room for 3 days, and I prepared, I think it was 16 sermons in 3 days in that motel room. Well, it wasn't prepared like it was polished or anything like that, but I did the best I could, and off to Roatan I went with this thing. Well, like I say, I got to Roatan. I couldn't do it the traditional way, so I decided that I would do 7 sermons on righteousness by faith, using the parable of the prodigal son, which I had in my little bag of tricks anyway. And so it was very providential that these Baptist people were coming, because they have the ideas that Seventh-day Adventists are legalistic and we don't know the plan of salvation. And when they heard, day by day, they came to me and they said, listen, if you would be pastor here, we would join your church. Well, that's nice, except that I had no opportunity to be pastor in Roatan, so they couldn't join my church. But anyway, I did 7 days, 7 nights of righteousness by faith, the plan of salvation, and then I did 7 nights of hardcore evangelism, the law, the Sabbath, baptism, state of the dead, all of these things, as many as I could cover. And in the end, we multiplied the number of the church attendance by 700%. Well, there was only 1 member. So that means we baptized 7 people. But let me tell you something. 1 year later, the pastor called me and he says, do you know that we have 30 members in 1 year? That's amazing. And so the church grew exponentially. I don't know what exactly happened there. I know that it wasn't me. I know that it was Jesus. He can work miracles, and he does work miracles, and he chooses some of the strangest people with whom he's going to work in order to work these miracles. And so he did, and to this day, I am praising God that he used me at that one point to do evangelism. Yes. I have time to tell you another story. Very quickly, I guess. It just goes that way. The next year, no, not the next year. The next year we did the same thing in Dominican Republic, and I think we did 100 sites then. And then the year after that, or 2 years later, we did it again in Ukraine, which was about 52 or 53 sites. And they gave me a site way up north on the Polish border. And when I got there, they told me, you can't do evangelism here. All that you can do is health message. As a matter of fact, we advertised that you were a health expert coming from America to do. And I said, I don't have any material on doing health evangelism. I have nothing to share on health evangelism. They said, well, that's too bad, but that's what you have to do, because these people, we started evangelism here. We lasted one night, and the police came in and they threw us out because everyone here is Catholic and they know where we're going, and it's not going to work here, so you've got to do health message. Like, oh man. And so here's what I did. I started, here's a great, it was 400 people, 450, I forget, something like that. People come into a really ornate hall. They have balconies. Everything is decorated, and it's just like in the old days. And all these people are there, and I'm telling them, listen, I grew up a Roman Catholic. I know all about that. And I said, but I've been a missionary in Africa now for 10 years. And if I come across very spiritual with a lot of spiritual stories, it's because I've been a missionary for a long time, okay? And so I began speaking to these people, telling them more stories about Africa than telling them about health message, doing as best I can to put in some health nuggets as often as I could. And I did that for 3 days in a row. Everyone was very happy with all of that, except that after 3 days, I said to the conference officials, listen, guys, I've run out. I don't know what more to say, you know. So I'm going to do spiritual things now. Oh, they were scared. They were petrified. They didn't want me to. I said, hey, it's too bad. That's what I'm doing. But I'm going to do the parable of the prodigal son. And so we're not going to lose anyone, because it's the plan of salvation. They won't hurt, and they'll like it. And they did. Everyone stayed. We never were down below 350 people coming every night. Every night. Well, after 7 days of that, or I don't know, maybe even 9 days of that, I told the conference official, okay, now for the rest of the time, hardcore evangelism. Oh, they nearly sank down and through the floor. They were just so afraid of what was going to happen, because I was going to do hardcore evangelism. Well, I started hardcore evangelism night after night. We never lost anyone. And then one night, I had told the people, I said, you send your questions in, and the next day I will answer all your questions. I promise you I will answer every single question, okay? And one night, here comes a question. And the question was this. At the beginning, at the first, when you first announced who you were, you said you grew up a Roman Catholic. You don't talk like a Roman Catholic. Who are you anyway? What would you have said? You know, the Lord is so good that He'll give you wisdom when you need it, right? I stood up and I had promised that I would answer every question. I said, listen, if I tell you that I'm a Roman Catholic, all the Protestants that are here will leave. Now, there aren't any, hardly. And if I tell you that I'm a Protestant, all the Catholics will leave. Now, I promise you, before it's all over, you will know who I am. I promise you, I will tell you who I am. But you have to be patient, because I'm not telling you tonight. I want you to come. And you know, they came. And they came every night. One night, a lady got up and started screaming, they're trying to change our religion. They're trying to change our religion. We're Catholics here, and these people are trying to make Protestants out of us. And so 3 or 4 guys jump on top of her, threw her out the door. And she come in through another door screaming like mad. They jump on her again, threw her out the door again. Anyway, I was able to continue my evangelism there. And we finished the whole thing, not losing anyone. And I believe that at the end of the whole evangelistic campaign, if I remember correctly, it's either 12 or 14 people were baptized. And we counted it a success. Whether it was a success or no, God only knows. I don't know anything. I just know that I'm doing what I'm called upon to do, and I don't worry about the rest. And so we should serve the Lord, don't you think? God bless you all. We're going to take a 15-minute break. Don't forget to come back. We're going to have a sermon on the 3 angels' messages. God bless you all.